On the eve of the wedding, the groom's first love demanded that her name be included on the invitation. The groom complied without hesitation and even wrote my name in the corner. Even my future in-laws tacitly approved of his absurd behavior. As a result, at the wedding, the guests and relatives from the groom's side mistook his first love for the bride, while treating me, the real bride, as a freeloading beggar and driving me out of the banquet hall. I did not attempt to clarify my identity but chose to turn and leave. When the wedding was nearing its end, the groom sent a distress message, "Serena, where are you? Come back quickly. The hotel is asking for the final payment of the wedding expenses, $1,880,000, come back and pay." I casually blocked him, "He's just trash, better out of sight, out of mind." "You say you're the bride? Then why isn't your name on the invitation?" Today was supposed to be my wedding day with Charles, but as the bride, I found myself barred from entering the banquet hall. That person insisted that my name wasn't on the invitation and wouldn't let me in. This was probably the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. I tried hard to explain to them, how could my name not be there? Of course, my name is next to Charles's. I casually picked up an invitation from the table and opened it. Just as I was about to prove my identity to them, I saw that next to Charles's name was prominently displayed another woman's name. Yvonne. I was not unfamiliar with this name. In the 4 years I had been dating Charles, I had heard this name countless times. She was Charles's first love, the one who had left a profound and unforgettable mark on his heart. Every time Charles mentioned her, it was usually when I had made a mistake. In Charles's words, Yvonne was always the epitome of perfection. About 2 weeks ago, while I was planning the wedding with Charles, he suddenly told me that he wanted to invite Yvonne. Although I felt somewhat uncomfortable, I did not refuse. In my view, Yvonne also represented Charles's youthful past. It was normal that he found it hard to forget her. But amusingly, the very next day, I happened to glance at Charles's phone and saw a flirtatious message from an unknown number. "I can't believe you're getting married so soon. Do you remember our promise that we'd make sure each other's names appeared on our invitations? Are you breaking that promise now?" I recognized at once that this was from Yvonne. I didn't confront Charles about it, as after 4 years together, I trusted he wasn't that kind of person. But now, holding this invitation with no photos and no mention of my name, so different from the one I'd seen at home, I realized Charles had changed the design. He had indeed placed Yvonne's name beside his own. And me? As the bride of this wedding, where was my name? Oh, found it. "Old Chen, look, isn't this the girl's name?" A nearby auntie, wearing reading glasses, scrutinized the invitation for a long time before finally pointing to a corner with her pen, calling out to the auntie who knew my name. They huddled together, peering at it for ages, their furrowed brows finally relaxing. "Wow, it's so tiny. If you hadn't pointed it out, I'd have thought it was an ant." I gripped the invitation tightly and finally spotted my name in a corner. The auntie's mocking tone ignited a growing fury within me. Yet I retained a shred of rationality. This wasn't her fault. If anyone was to blame, it was Charles. But now, Charles was inside the dressing room changing, while I couldn't even get through the door. I'm an orphan with no relatives, so the wedding invitations went only to Charles's family. In these 4 years, I'd only met his parents. I wanted to show them my chat history with Charles to prove my identity, but Aunt Nellie snorted derisively, saying, "Who doesn't know chat logs can be faked these days? Do you take us for offline relics?" I was frantic, nearly talking my mouth dry, but they still had no intention of letting me in. Just as I was at a loss, I looked up and saw Charles's mother hurrying out. My eyes lit up, and I waved, shouting, "Mom! Come help me. These 2 aunties won't let me in no matter what." I thought my future mother-in-law would rush over upon hearing me, but instead, she merely glanced my way, frowned slightly, and left without a backward glance, as if she didn't know me at all. "Ha ha ha ha, calling her mom, huh? Little girl, don't just claim relatives. Auntie's advice, find a proper job instead of freeloading all day. Aunt Nellie rolled her eyes, then switched faces to greet other guests. I couldn't understand why Auntie had turned on me like that, so I called Charles. But instead of his voice, I got a cold, mechanical tone. I stood there in disbelief, phone in hand. On our wedding day, my husband had blocked me? What was going on? Messages to Charles sank without a trace, no replies. Standing at the venue's entrance, I was pointed at by passers-by, their whispers reaching my ears, making me increasingly anxious. Just then, the two aunties in front of me lit up, springing to their feet. "Oh, isn't this the bride? So beautiful." Smiling, they shoved me aside and rushed past. Puzzled, I turned and saw a woman in a shoha dress surrounded by a crowd. She smiled, her hair elegantly pinned up in a refined Chinese style, a small flower pinned to her chest. She truly looked more like today's bride than I did. I'd seen that face in Charles's high school photos, so I recognized her instantly. She was Charles's first love, Yvonne. My pent-up anger finally found an outlet. I charged at Yvonne, grabbing her clothes, prompting gasps from the surrounding uncles and aunties. "Yvonne! It's your doing, isn't it?" Yvonne kept smiling, her innocent face betraying clear smugness and contempt. "My doing? Serena, you overestimate me. Haven't you considered this is all Charles's work?" Yvonne lowered her voice, but each word pierced my heart like an arrow. "I merely mentioned wanting my name next to his, and he didn't hesitate to shove yours into a corner. And haven't you noticed? There's no wedding photo of you two, not on the invitations or at the venue. Isn't it obvious? This wedding today was clearly Charles using you to stage a ceremony with me." Yvonne seized my wrist and, as I stood stunned, pried my fingers apart. "Speaking of which, Serena, you're truly pathetic. For years together, and you still couldn't make Charles forget me. If I were you, I'd hang myself." Charles hadn't forgotten her? Then what were these 4 years to him? At that moment, amid the bustling crowd, my mind replayed every moment of the past 4 years with Charles. I first met Charles at a student council meeting. He was a freshman then, while I was already the president. I still remember it was my birthday. As an orphan, my birthday was just a symbol, not even my real birth date, but the day I entered the orphanage. I'd never celebrated my birthday in all those years. But that day, when I stepped into the meeting room, it was pitch dark. I flipped on the lights and saw them holding a cake, standing in the center of the room, shouting, "Happy birthday!" That moment of surprise was genuine. So when I learned it was Charles's idea, that he'd casually noticed my birthday in my file and remembered it, I was touched. I thought it was the start of a romantic love story, but now it feels like the beginning of a nightmare. I stood there dazed as nearby voices questioned, "Yvonne, do you know her? She's acting crazy, insisting she's today's bride." Yvonne smiled, her lips moving as she said, "Her? Probably just a deranged beggar." Yvonne tossed out those words and strode into the venue. I tried to follow, but I was blocked. A few aunties formed a wall in front of me, eyeing me up and down before sneering with disdain. I thought it was someone important, turns out it's a crazy beggar. A beggar dressed so well, probably stole it somewhere. Maybe from us. Their voices were sharp and mocking, hands slightly covering their noses as if smelling something foul. My hands clenched into fists at my sides as I repeated, "I really am today's bride. If you don't believe me, look at my photos with Charles." I pulled out my phone to show the album, but before I could find a photo, it was snatched away. An auntie in a dark red dress marveled, "Wow, even beggars have such nice phones now? What a world." She started to tuck my phone into her chest, and I lunged forward. "Give it back." Before I could touch it, she let out a piercing shriek. "Ah! Help! This beggar's trying to hit me, save me." Her cries instantly drew the attention of the uncles smoking outside. They stubbed out their cigarettes and approached with furrowed brows. "What's going on?" one uncle asked in a low voice. I opened my mouth to explain, but another auntie cut in, "This person's a deranged beggar, claiming she's the bride and trying to ruin the wedding." Her single sentence pinned me as a beggar. I hurriedly tried to explain, but they didn't give me a chance. "A beggar?" A tall, burly man, nearly 6'3", strode toward me and grabbed my clothes. He sized me up, sneering, "A beggar dressed this well trying to climb the social ladder? I bet these clothes are stolen." "Me too, let's strip her." Panicked, I clutched my clothes, begging them to stay back, but the men advanced like cats spotting a mouse, leering. The closest man even started tearing at my clothes. I scratched his face with my fresh manicure, and as he recoiled in pain, I quickly fixed my outfit, glaring warily. "What are you doing?" "Sexual harassment, believe me, I'll call the police." "A beggar who stole stuff dares to call the cops." "These clothes aren't yours, I'm just taking back what doesn't belong to you." With that, they surrounded me, pinning my arms and restraining me. I struggled desperately to escape the humiliation, but the more I fought, the harder they held on. Someone slapped me first, stars exploding before my eyes, my head throbbing. Then slap after slap rained down, leaving me powerless to fight back. I collapsed to the ground, and eventually, a ring fell from my bag. The auntie in red swiftly snatched up the box. Inside was this wedding ring. Her eyes gleamed. "Goodness, where did this beggar steal such a ring?" Her eyes darted slyly, and she pocketed the box, pointing at me and shouting, "It's her. She stole my ring, and now I've caught her. Hurry, throw this thief out." I stared at her in disbelief, doubting my ears. "No, that's..." But they didn't let me speak. A slap landed on my face, knocking me to the ground. Security rushed over after hearing the commotion and, upon hearing the full story, approached me. By now, my heart held not just anger but the humiliation of being degraded. Gritting my teeth, I glared fiercely at everyone with their devilish grins. "You'll regret this." "Regret? What can a beggar like you do to us?" The auntie snorted, trying to force the ring onto her swollen finger but failing. She carefully tucked it into her bosom instead. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Sean emerge from the reception hall, and my eyes lit up. Sean was Charles's friend. He must know me. "Sean!" I shouted his name, fearing he'd ignore me like Charles's mother had. Thankfully, Sean paused, frowning as he approached. Hope surged within me again. "Sean, quick, explain to them, Who's this? Hurry up and get her out, the ceremony's about to start." Sean's words snuffed out my last flicker of hope. The security guard beside me, hearing him, immediately moved to drag me away. I stared at the man in disbelief, but he gave me a scornful smirk, his lips moving. "I read them," he said, "you deserve it." Then it hit me, Sean was retaliating because I'd once rejected his advances. Eventually, security threw me out of the hall, and as I hit the ground hard, it felt like my organs shifted. Those uncles and aunties stood at the entrance, and someone spat at me. "Pa. Bad luck, trash, get lost." My ears rang with their jeers. My phone was tossed beside me, its screen shattered into pieces. "Worthless junk, just like you." My clothes were covered in greasy fingerprints, tattered and hanging off me. My carefully styled hair now resembled a bird's nest. Everything that happened today felt like a dream. I thought I'd marry the man I loved, but instead, I was brutally humiliated and learned Charles never truly liked me. These 4 years and memories were treasures to me, but perhaps to Charles, they meant nothing. I walked on, ignoring the curious stares of passers-by. Eventually, I stopped outside a Western restaurant, the place where Charles proposed. It was just months ago, yet it felt like a lifetime. A waiter from the restaurant spotted me and approached. "Serena, how'd you end up like this? Isn't today your wedding day?" I gave a bitter smile and waved him off. I'd bought this place 6 months ago because Charles liked it, secretly becoming its behind-the-scenes owner, planning to gift it to him after the wedding. Now, he'd never get it. I was about to explain when my phone rang. Charles. After a moment's hesitation, I answered. Charles's harsh voice berated me through the phone, his anger piercing my eardrums. Serena, where are you? Get back here. The hotel's demanding the wedding balance, $1.88 million. Come pay it now. His commanding tone showed he'd mastered freeloading. I gave a cold laugh and countered, shouldn't whoever attends the wedding pay? I'm not even the bride, why should I foot the bill? I started my business in my junior year, and though not wildly successful after 4 years, I'm a small-scale boss. Having no family since childhood, I valued Charles deeply and treated his parents like my own with filial devotion. A wedding, the most important event in a girl's life, left me humiliated today because of Charles. After this, how could I still obey him? Perhaps sensing my anger, Charles softened his tone. Serena, today was my mistake. I didn't expect this outcome. But legally, you're still my wife. I just wanted to fulfill a youthful regret. A regret? I spent over $2 million on this wedding venue, not to fulfill his youthful whims. I cursed him inwardly but feigned persuasion on the surface. After a pause, I said, fine, wait there, I'll come now. Good, honey, I'll wait, he replied. Hearing him, I sneered inwardly. After hanging up, the waiter hesitated. Serena, are you really going back? No way, I replied. I'm not foolish enough to actually pay. I said that to Charles just to get a bit of revenge. I took a cab home and blocked all his contact methods. Back home, I didn't rest. I packed all of Charles's things and dumped them downstairs. My upscale apartment has top-notch security. Thankfully, the house is in my name, or I wouldn't even have the chance to kick Charles out now. I called the property management, informing them of my split with Charles and instructing them not to let him in next time. About 3 hours later, the doorbell rang. I answered, and soon saw Charles's furious face on the screen. He was stopped at the gate, his neat hair now a mess, with visible scratches on his face likely from another drama at the hotel. Serena, what's your deal? You left me alone at our wedding today, humiliated. Do you know I maxed out all my credit cards to pay that bill? Charles's voice boomed, his rage palpable even through the screen. I rubbed my battered ears and laughed. Our wedding? Mr. Charles, you're mistaken. Wasn't Yvonne the bride today? What's it got to do with me? What, just because Yvonne couldn't cough up the $1.8 million, you're switching affections? Hearing me, Charles's tone softened. Serena, I know you're mad about today. Listen, I truly have no feelings for Yvonne. Today was just an accident. If it bothers you, we can hold another wedding. Nice dream spending my money to remarry trash like him. Did he take me for a recycling bin? Charles, save your dreams for tonight, we're done. I moved to hang up, but my words reignited his agitation. He gnashed his teeth as if he'd swallow me whole the next second. Serena. You wait. Click. I hung up without hesitation. That night, I learned what Charles was up to. He went live, accusing me of abandoning him at the wedding. We dated for 4 years, but on our wedding day, she left me alone at the venue. For her vanity, she booked the priciest hall, nearly $2 million, then ditched me over some baseless misunderstanding, leaving me to pay the balance alone. I'm a man, paying's no big deal, and I'd forgive her skipping the wedding, but when I sought clarity, she threw all my stuff out of the house. Charles was a skilled actor. If I weren't involved, I might have bought his nonsense. The gaggle of relatives who'd treated me like a beggar at the wedding backed Charles up, framing my forced exit as abandonment, never mentioning Yvonne. Charles's mother sat beside him, sobbing to the camera, "We're live today not to reclaim that money, we just want answers. We drained our savings to cover the wedding, and now she just calls it off. I ask you all, isn't this what they call a scam marriage?" The livestream viewers were clearly brainwashed by Charles, siding with him, demanding justice, and hurling personal attacks at me. This bizarre saga quickly drew more attention. Overnight, my name was exposed, along with the company I run. The company faced public backlash and stocks wavered, but that wasn't what enraged me most. What infuriated me was that they targeted the orphanage I'd once lived in. In recent years, the orphanage's income had dwindled, forcing the director to start a social media account, posting daily updates to attract kind-hearted donors. After succeeding in business, I donated to the orphanage yearly. But now, its videos were flooded with netizens hurling indiscriminate insults at the director. What kind of place raises a woman like Serena? Bet those donations funded her company. This whole orphanage is rotten. That little girl looks like a future criminal. Bet this orphanage churns out women like Serena, scamming suckers for wedding payouts. The vile comments were endless. Even during the director's live streams, the chat overflowed with filth. He had to shut it down, yet he didn't blame me. Instead, he comforted me. After a full day of brewing outrage, Charles called, his tone smug. "So, Serena, realize your mistake yet?" I glanced at my recording phone and smirked. "What do you want?" Before, I just wanted the 1.8 million, but now it's not that simple. I want the house in your name, plus another 2 million for emotional distress. After all, I was humiliated yesterday, unable to pay in front of everyone. Charles's demands were outrageous, bordering on extortion. I wondered how I'd ever fallen for such a freeloader. His gall disgusted me. But I replied, "I can't come up with that much right away. Give me some time." Charles pondered, then agreed loudly, "Fine, I'll give you 3 more days. If you trick me, I've got ways to ruin you for life." After hanging up, I saved the recording. Exposing Charles's lies would be easy, but that wasn't my true goal. Looking at Yvonne's file on the table, I smirked mockingly. Her breakup with Charles back then was cliched. It was simply because Yvonne's family was too poor, and marriage would have been tough, so both families forced them apart. Over the years, Yvonne worked hard to make money, but in the wrong ways, even picking up a gambling addiction. She returned this time, broke, hoping to cash in on Charles. Now, loan sharks were hunting for Yvonne. I didn't mind lending a hand. I picked an intimate photo of her and Charles, slipped it into an envelope, and had it sent to them. 3 days flew by. Charles, still unpaid, called again. "Serena. You wretch, where's the money you promised?" Leaning back in my chair, I hit enter. "Don't rush, Charles. Check online for my surprise." I got the hotel owner to give me the lobby footage from that day and uploaded the full recording online. Charles blew up instantly. The twist came so fast it caught netizens off guard. What, the another woman as the bride at his own wedding? No wonder she bolted. I'd hop a plane and run. I said there'd be a twist, but you wouldn't believe me. Good Lord, his relatives are trash too, sexually harassing her in public. Disgusting, makes me sick. Typical freeloading jerk, wants it all. Soon, Charles and his bizarre family were infamous. Charles's unhinged curses came through the phone. "You, Serena. Playing dirty with me, you wretch. I'll kill you." I had no time for his rant and hung up. Charles tried to salvage things online, but no one bought it this time. Plus, his old classmates spilled more. He and Yvonne were high school sweethearts, already together back then. That's not all. At our last reunion, Yvonne, knowing Charles was engaged, still flirted with him. They slipped away for half an hour. Who knows what they did? Maybe they hooked up then. Some youthful first love. This guy's so devoted. Devoted my ass. Charles was a player in school, an animal who couldn't control himself. Yeah, back in school, he probably slept with countless girls. A guy who can't live without women. Online dirt on Charles grew wilder, some escalating to smutty rumors. Who could tell truth from fiction anymore? I ignored the online chatter and worked until quitting time. But as I left the office, a figure lunged at me. Squinting, I realized it was Charles, masked and capped, hiding his face half a net celebrity now. His exposed eyes radiated unmasked fury and resentment. "Serena! How dare you do this to me?" Charles hissed. I found it laughable. Some people can dish it out but can't take it. Keeping a safe distance, I retorted, "Why can't I?" "Charles, when you spewed those lies, did you consider my feelings? When you and Yvonne vowed to each other before the officiant, did you think of me? Why should I care about your feelings now?" Charles was speechless, yet he stubbornly grabbed at me, his bloodshot eyes terrifyingly intense. "So what? You owe me. As my girlfriend, you should accept everything about me." Charles's absurd rant was cut short. A van screeched to a stop behind us, and 3 burly men jumped out, seizing Charles. We both froze in shock. "What the hell? Who are you? Let me go!" Charles thrashed, screaming hysterically as onlookers turned our way. Another man smiled apologetically at the crowd, "Sorry, folks, I'm his brother. My little bro's got mental issues, ran off today, and I'm here to take him back." "Mental issues? I don't know you. Let me go." Charles fought harder, but he was no match for 2 men. Exhausted at last, he turned pleading eyes to me. "Serena! Save me!" The 3 glanced at me. I touched my nose and smiled. "I don't know him. Maybe a deranged beggar." Charles's despairing look as he was loaded into the van was palpable. Charles vanished. As the last person to see him, I faced police questioning and recounted everything truthfully. When asked why I didn't help, I calmly said, "There were 3 of them, 4 with the driver. As a lone woman, even if I wanted to save him, it'd be under the condition of my own safety." The police couldn't argue, and since I provided the license plate and key descriptions of the men, they lectured me briefly before letting me go. Stepping out of the interrogation room, I saw Charles's parents sitting there, looking aged, eyes vacant, hands clasped tightly together. Hearing my steps, they looked up together. Seeing me, Charles's mother leapt up and charged, raising her hand to strike, but a cop stopped her. "You murderer! Murderer! If not for you, my son wouldn't be in this mess. Why didn't you help him, why?" Charles's mother shrieked hysterically, tears and snot streaking her face. I stood there, gazing at her calmly. "Didn't you refuse to help me too?" Stunned, she collapsed, wailing. I walked past her out of the station, no looking back, no softening. Charles was eventually found by the police, and his kidnappers faced due punishment. In just days, Charles looked like he'd endured inhuman torment, sunken cheeks, incontinent, eyes eerily vacant. Interrogating the kidnappers, police learned Yvonne had tipped off the loan sharks about Charles's location, leading to his abduction. The police then hunted for Yvonne. When they found her, she was bloodied on the ground, missing 2 fingers, and had suffered inhumane abuse. I visited them in the hospital once. Charles drooled at the sight of me. The doctor said shock had left him a fool. Yvonne would live out her days with a colostomy bag. After it all settled, I returned to the orphanage. The director and kids were thrilled to see me. Thankfully, they were unaffected. The director said this ordeal brought more attention to the orphanage, and after it resolved, they received more donations, a silver lining. But as I left, the director held my hand, sighing, "Ah, who'll marry you? Will I live to see your wedding?" I can't stand the director's marriage nagging, so I made an excuse and slipped away. But perhaps his persistence paid off. That fall and winter, I met a guy who truly stirred my heart. He was a rival company's boss opponent, yet his confident speech captivated me. I pursued him and won him over in 2 months. Unlike Charles, he didn't belittle or drain me. We were equals. We planned to ring in the new year together. But as we left that Western restaurant, I spotted 2 familiar figures on the street. Yvonne, with a bag at her waist, held a rope tied to Charles. Rumor had it Charles's parents, thinking he'd never find a wife, forced Yvonne to marry him. Now her face showed disgust and sorrow, yet she clung to that rope, a twisted holding hands indeed. What's wrong? What are you looking at? Cold? He took off his jacket, draped it over me, then took my hand, leading us toward home.